Hello everybody, welcome to Mission City Exotics. My name is Connie. This is Noodle, very happy to introduce himself. And today's video is going to be all about isopods. Now, I may or may not have a crippling addiction to buying isopods. On an unrelated note, we are going to be setting up isopod bins for my newly acquired isopods and going over how to set that up, what that substrate looks like, what can you feed your isopods, and how to incorporate them into your bioactives for the most success. Now, as listed on screen, I have the part ratios for my mixture that I use for my isopods for substrate. I really like it because the cocoa blocks add a lot of volume to substrate and it helps the pods burrow around, and the sphagnum moss as well as the cocoa blocks really help to maintain moisture. And I like to add charcoal because I will culture springtails with my isopods most of the time because it can help keep away some unwanted pests that will come if you feed your isopods a little bit too much food. This just essentially happens by there being leftover food that the isopods aren't eating, and so other bugs will come in and be trying to eat that. When mixing the substrate, it is really important to make sure that you are really incorporating the cocoa blocks into the mixture so that once it's in the pods bins that they don't have mainly cocoa blocks and they still have a good amount of soil to burrow through. When putting the soil into their bins, you want to make sure that you have 2 to 4 layers of substrate on the bottom. Some isopods, like dwarf whites, they want a thicker substrate because that's what they burrow in and they go under. Other isopods are going to mainly stay on top and roam around the leaf litter. As you can see from how I'm setting this up, I'm consolidating most of the sphagnum moss on one side of the bin. This is so that the isopods are going to have a wet and dry side to their bin. This lets them roam around and figure out where they need to be and what will suit them the most at this time. This is what keeps them the healthiest from I've seen in keeping them because it allows them to regulate and they won't ever be too wet or too dry. It is still very important to make sure you go out and research whatever isopods you're getting because some have very different care requirements than others. Now, what you're seeing here is really crucial to when you're setting up your bins for the first time. You have to make sure that when you spray them down, you go through your substrate and mix it all up so that it's not just the top layer that's getting wet and it's all of it. This part is when I really make sure I'm differentiating my wet from my dry, and I'm really spraying down that sphagnum moss and making sure everything's patted down and ready to go for the isopods. As you can see here in the end, I'm just getting in some last final adjustments so that when the isopods are moved into here, everything is all ready for them. Now, I do want to note that right now is usually when I would add my leaf litter, but I'm adding in some more soil because I'm moving in a colony of pre-established isopods and upgrading their bin. Now for the fun part where you're going to be moving your isopods into your bin. In this bin, I'm adding in some Madagascar isopods, and I'm going to move around their soil and make sure I distribute it all around the bin and then mix it through because you never want to throw out their soil because there's often more isopods hiding in the soil. Now here's where you can see me adding in some leaf litter, and depending on your colony size, you're going to need to refresh your leaf litter more frequently or less frequently. Larger colonies will eat through their leaf litter in a matter of days or weeks, while it might take some smaller colonies upwards of a month. And it is important to note that in many cases, leaf litter has a dual purpose, acting as both that food source and a source of shelter. Here's where you're going to see me adding in some leaf litter and some hides for another colony that I'm moving into a different bin. Now, what is really important if you're going to gather your own leaf litter or your own bark, that you make sure that you sterilize it before. For my leaf litter, I boil it, and I do the same for my bark if I have a small enough piece, or if I do not, I will bake it. Now what you're going to see here is a small spread of a bunch of different things you can feed your isopods. And there's obviously way more than this you can feed them, but this is just a good little visual representation. Now, the first thing I put in there is some sweet potato because I like using that to feed my larger colonies because they burn through food so quickly and it helps get them something that's a base that they can eat. Now, the white stuff is some cuttlefish bone, which is really good to keep the pod's calcium intake up and make sure they're staying healthy. Now, a couple other things I like to use for pods that need a little bit more protein is the turtle food because it has about 41% protein, and some fish flakes because they really go for those. Now the oats are also nice because they offer them some variety, along with the gecko food because it can come in a bunch of different flavors, so it has different makeups and can serve different purposes. I want to show this clip of these little guys eating because it gives a little bit of an insight into how much they really can eat. That log used to be fully covered in bark, but they have eaten right through it. But before we move on, enjoy a small time lapse of the pods exploring their new environments. Now what you see right here is the substrate of one of my bioactives, and I really like this picture because you can see all the different places where the isopods can hide in this substrate to make sure that, especially if you have a reptile where they might be seeing those isopods as a little snack, that they have somewhere to get to where they can stay safe and keep cleaning your substrate. Now we've reached that point of the video where we're about done. If there's any isopod or reptile content you'd like me to cover, let me know down below in the comments, and thank you so much for watching.